Your TV's coverage of the 2025 provincial election. I'm York Bellsmith, and today I will be moderating today's provincial candidates debate for the riding of Northumberland-Peterborough South. Before we go further, Your TV would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are located in the traditional land treaty territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. Your TV respectively acknowledges that the Williams Treaty First Nations have been stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters, and that they remain vigilant over their health and integrity for generations to come. We are all treaty people. For the purposes of this debate, we have invited candidates who are representing parties currently elected and sitting in the Ontario Legislature. Your TV offered airtime to the other candidates running in this election. None of those candidates responded to our requests. With us today from the Green Party, Maxwell Groves, from the NDP, Bruce LePage, from the Liberal Party, Dorothy Noronha, and from the Progressive Conservatives, David Piccini. For the next 2 hours, the candidates will discuss, debate, and lay out their political platform on various topics and questions put together by Your TV staff and volunteers. The rules for the debate are as follows. Before the debate began, the candidates picked a number out of a hat for seating purposes. Opening statements will be up to 2 minutes, and we will then move into question and answer part of the debate. Each candidate will be given up to 2 minutes to answer each question. Once each candidate has had an opportunity to answer the question, the floor will be open for debate between the candidates. Each candidate will be given 1 minute to rebut what was said by previous candidates. The order for answering questions by the candidates will change throughout the debate. For example, the first question will be answered in the order of 2, 3, 1, 4. The second question will go 3, 4, 1, 2, etc. through the debate. Each candidate will be given up to 2 minutes for closing statements. This will be in reverse order of the opening statements. Finally, candidates were not allowed to bring in any printed or electronic material for the debate. They were provided a notepad and pen upon arrival. Now that we've explained the rules of the debate, let's introduce the candidates. From the Green Party, Maxwell Groves. Born and raised in Port Hope, Maxwell returns to Northumberland County after years in Toronto, eager to engage with the local community. Inspired to run for the Green Party, he believes rural populations are overlooked and need strong representation. A conservationist and outdoor enthusiast, he advocates for watershed protection, farmland preservation, and sustainable farming. From the NDP, Bruce LePage. Bruce LePage was a teacher for over 30 years, first in Toronto, and then locally when he and his young family moved to his wife's hometown of Cobourg. Bruce taught at CDCI East, CCI, since 2001, and was the IB coordinator from 2007 until his retirement in 2022. Although he no longer coaches, Bruce remains active volunteer with the St. John Ambulance Therapy Dog Program. He has been passionate about politics and helping people since his student days. From the Liberal Party, Dorothy Noronha. Dorothy has called Northumberland home for over 20 years. Over the past 3 decades, she has run many small businesses. Until February 2025, she was teaching business and leadership at CCI Institute and was part of the coaching team for CCI's senior boys basketball. Before teaching, Dorothy worked as an employee benefits and pension specialist and a wealth and estate planning counselor, and in marketing in the healthcare sector. And representing the Progressive Conservatives, David Piccini. David is a dedicated resident of Port Hope, where he grew up and now lives with his wife and their 2 dogs, Max and Lena. David frequently hikes in Northumberland County forest trails and loves to visit the Killarney Provincial Park with his father. He's an active member of this community and has most recently served as Ontario's Minister of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skills Development. And before entering politics, worked for the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. Now that we have introduced the candidates, we will hear their opening statements, starting with Maxwell Groves.
Hi everybody, my name is Maxwell Groves. As York said, I was born and raised in Port Hope. Unfortunately, Ontario is in crisis. We haven't been building enough housing since the 90s, and healthcare and education are deeply underfunded. The Greens have the solutions to get us back on track and embrace the green transition coming in the near future. If you want to send a message to Doug Ford, if you're angry, if you feel your vote doesn't matter, send me to Queen's Park.
Thank you, Maxwell. And now from the NDP, Bruce LePage.
Thank you. My name is Bruce LePage. I moved to Ontario in 1988 from Nova Scotia. For the same reason, a lot of people came before and after me because Ontario was the place of opportunity. I fell in love with Ontario. I fell in love with a young woman who became my wife. We moved back here to our hometown in 1999, where I began teaching locally. But in the past few years, we've noticed that things are getting harder for people here. It's harder for working folks, working families, harder for young people starting out, harder for senior citizens who spent their lives working and saving, harder for all of us. And it doesn't have to be that way. We can put a government in place that'll work for everyone, not just the well-heeled and the well-connected. We can hire doctors and nurses, which we badly need. We can fix our schools and hire the adults needed to help our students thrive. We can build homes we all can afford. We can repair our crumbling infrastructure. We can help with the cost of food. We can tariff-proof our economy. We can protect our farmland, and we can build transit to get people moving. We can work with federal and provincial partners to improve east-west trade and expand our overseas markets. We will work with industry, small businesses, labor, and employers to make sure we have well-paying jobs for all Ontarians. We will fix post-secondary education and fix OSAP so our students can get the training and education they need to be successful and people can retrain for new careers. The NDP will work for all of us, not just the well-heeled and well-connected. We will not have wasteful and expensive distractions such as tunnels under the 401, beer and corner stores. We are here for everyone. Let's do this together.
Thank you, Bruce. And from the Liberal Party, Dorothy, Noronha, your opening statement.
Thank you. It's been 22 years since we moved to Northumberland County, and it was a bit of a long and winding road that brought us here. I was originally born in Toronto, but I had parents that had a magnetic draw to the north, so I actually did my high school in Muskoka, beautiful Gravenhurst, Ontario. So when our family found Northumberland, it truly felt like home. In fact, my tagline, "No place like home," stolen from The Wizard of Oz, rings very, very true, particularly in Alnwick-Haldeman, where I currently live. Nice center of the riding. But I actually spent 8 years in Campbellford. And our riding is vast. It's actually massive. Anyone who's here who's tried to traverse it, hard to do, particularly with the snap election. We were expecting an election in spring of 2026. I was planning on retiring in June and spending a year, because I figured that's probably what it's going to take to meet all the people of this amazing riding, to go to the festivals, to go to the farmers markets, to connect, to listen to concerns of citizens so that we can actually respond to those concerns. Living in Campbellford, we felt like second-class citizens because everything happens in Cobourg, everything happens in Port Hope. And here I am, slugging through the snow, trying to reach, and there's just no time. I mean, an election that's called with 3 days, with voting cards that don't show up, for an election that really is unnecessary. We have a premier who has a mandate. He has a majority government. What more mandate do you need? You had the opposition party saying, absolutely, we'll support you. And yet we've wasted an entire month that we could be fighting tariffs. Instead, we're spending $189 billion on an election. We need to do better than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. From the Progressive Conservatives, David Piccini.
Thanks, York. My name is David Piccini, and I'm asking for your vote on February 27th. I live in Port Hope with my wife and our 2 great dogs, and I always appreciate throwing out their names in the intro, so thank you. Love living in our community. My why is same today as it was when I ran first in 2018. My parents always said, be the sort of change you want to see in your community and get actively involved in a rural Ontario that was left behind by previous Liberal governments. This election's about leadership. It's about who you can trust to protect Ontario in the unprecedented threats of Donald Trump's tariffs, the musings of the Office of the Presidency referring to Canada as a 51st state. It's about who we can trust to protect our jobs. I was on the phone the other day with Travis Walker up in Mermill in Campbellford. Travis does custom woodwork, sells over 70% of his business to the United States. He employs a number of men and women in our community who are concerned about their jobs. And he knows, and they know, that Premier Doug Ford will protect our workers and protect our jobs. For seniors who've lived under the same Liberals who ran Ontario, who've now migrated to Ottawa, who haven't increased CPP, OAS, who live under the struggle of fixed income, the punishing carbon tax, increased taxes. They know that Premier Ford and the PC government will have and protect their pocketbooks. When it comes to our future, our youth, our next generation, I think to last night, talking about the very living classroom of the music hall in Port Hope, where the next generation of cement masons will build. We're building a stronger Ontario wherever you look, be it the Water Tower in Hastings, Norwood, the new industrial park in Port Hope that's employing a next generation. We're building a stronger Ontario. On February 27th, choose leadership, a premier that will protect Ontario, protect your jobs. We're not the 51st state. We're proud to be Canadian, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you, David, and thank you all for your opening statements. We now start this debate off with why we are having this election. Premier Ford called an early election stating that he did not have a mandate to spend the money he may need to spend to offset the cost of tariffs that President Trump may impose on goods. Do you agree with this? And if not, why do you feel we are having this election? We begin the first question with Bruce LePage.
Thank you, York. Absolutely not. We do not need this election. This is clearly a political election for Mr. Ford to secure his future. It has nothing to do with our future. As Ms. Noronha said, the Ford government has a large majority. They had a year and a half left in their mandate. They had every tool they needed to fight the threat of Mr. Ford's hero, Mr. Trump's tariffs. What he's trying to do is he's trying to get ahead of not doing the job in a year and a half. He doesn't think he can be successful with his track record of not being successful for Ontarians in the time he has left. So he wants to stretch it out to 4 years so he can at least secure his future for another 4 years. We are going to waste $190 million on an unneeded election. Everyone I've spoken to, regardless of their political alliance, is angry about this. They don't know why we're wasting this money. We don't know why we're wasting this time. Everyone in Queen's Park agreed to stand together and to fight with Mr. Ford against Mr. Trump, but that wasn't enough. Mr. Ford is interested in his future and not in ours. So we really need to change the tune and put in a government that will work for the people first and not for themselves, and that is Marit Stiles and the NDP.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Dorothy, your response.
It's interesting. We've had 4 debates up until this point, and it's incredible how much we agree with each other on the fact that this is a needless election. There's no reason at all, and in fact, it's a disenfranchising election. When you look at the fact that, first of all, we call it with 3 days' notice. We've done it in February, literally. Apparently there's bad weather in February. We've lived that literally every other day. I have people panicking. I'm in Florida. What do I do? I guess you're done. Seniors that are asking me, well, so where is the returning office? Well, it's in Port Hope. So get your GPS and be careful because there's a really large speed bump there, and it's like, you're joking, right? No, we're not joking. Literally, this election has been set up to disenfranchise, to reduce the turnout, because we know that favors the incumbent. A low turnout favors the incumbent. I get as angry as the constituents on this one, but you know what? We do what we have to do. We will fight to make sure that voices are heard, and we'll fight to make sure we have a government that's concerned with public service, not personal gain.
Thank you very much. And David, your response.
Yeah, this election is about the unprecedented threat that we see south of the border. I think to my time, I think anybody here at this table here today, we've never seen from the office of the presidency of the United States referring and musing to Canada as a 51st state. These tariffs threaten the livelihood of hundreds of thousands of Ontario workers. And we need, and the Ontario government needs, a mandate that exceeds that of President Trump. And people understand that it's about leadership and about the real kind of leadership you can count on to protect your pocketbook, to protect your jobs, and they'll get that from Premier Doug Ford and from the Ontario PC government. We're not the 51st state. We'll never be for sale. And we have proud traditions, manufacturing that fled under the previous Liberal government that are coming back, apprenticeship pathways, getting youth. The reality today, you learn while you earn while you learn, and we're supporting that in our own community. We've got a lot of people on the backbone of our energy sector, of our automotive sector that's back, and of in manufacturing sectors all over Northumberland-Peterborough South. So it's imperative. I mean, we don't get our mandate from other political parties. You get your mandate from the people. And the ultimate manifestation is democracy and people having their say. And I'm confident that on February 27th, the people will re-elect a PC government that they can count on to protect them, to protect their jobs, to protect their pocketbook, and to protect our future.
Thank you very much, David. And Maxwell, your answer to our first question having to do with why we're having the election.
Economists are all saying the next 5 years are going to be hairy. There's going to be unprecedented changes in the workforce as we see the baby boomers retire. There's a whole skill set that could potentially be lost if those skills aren't transferred to the next generation. Doug knows we have hard times ahead, and he's trying to get ahead of the narrative. This has very little to do with tariff and more just covering his behind.
Thank you very much. We now have 1 minute each for rebuttal before we open the floor to open debate. Bruce, did you want to start with a rebuttal?
Absolutely. David, you said that this is about leadership, and you're absolutely right. Doug Ford has been a great cheerleader for the Vaughan developers and for major corporations. He is the leader of bad deals. He is a lead suspect in an RCMP investigation into wrongdoing with the Greenbelt. He is leading us down the garden path. And we need someone who's going to stand up for average working class Ontarians, who's not going to line the pocket of the rich and the well-connected. It's going to work for all of us. And that is not Doug Ford. That's the farthest from the truth. Doug Ford is a silver spoon. He has no idea what life is like outside of his bubble that he lives in. He is delusional. He thinks the people of Ontario are being fooled by that now. And we need a good, strong leadership. Mart Stiles and NDP, we're the ones to do that.
Thank you. Dorothy.
So you had a mandate. To say that you have to go to the people with the mandate, a majority government is a mandate. We've lost a month. We've lost a month. The East-West trade that we absolutely need, why are we starting it now? It should have been happening all the way along. Why is it a crisis? Why is it a threat of a 51st state that now says, oh, wait, I guess we better become more competitive? You've had 7 years, for crying out loud, to get this going. And to apprenticeships, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, you have never worked in a school, have you? Try to get an apprenticeship. I have a student in OYAP, top of my class, hardworking guy, did his OYAP. Sorry, no apprenticeships for you. Try to get into a trade program at Loyalist. They're all being cut. You know why? Because post-secondary funding is being cut. We've got lots of announcements, but not the results.
We are talking about tariffs and the reason for having this election. David.
Yeah, I mean, you heard the Liberal candidate say, why is it a crisis? I mean, that reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of the people we serve and the concerns we hear at the door. It is a crisis. Referring to this province, this country as a 51st state scares people. The threat of tariffs that affect the steel sector. I'm the grandson of a proud steel worker, worked in Stelco, was members of a union. You know, I think to the NDP, look, workers didn't leave the NDP. The NDP left workers. It's why we've got a historic number of labor unions endorsing this party, because they know Premier Ford will protect their jobs. We are training a next generation. Again, you hear sort of an old viewpoint that the only training occurs in a classroom. We know training occurs in union halls. It occurs out on the job site. And that's what we're doing here in Ontario. We'll protect those workers and protect this province.
Dorothy, you had a response?
Yeah, I'm wondering what workers are going to be hired without training, without education. And that does happen in a classroom. We have I don't know if you've been to CCI, mechanical tech, auto tech, construction, welding, except that they're not funded. Right now they're MacGyver, because the schools are being funded on average $1,500 less per student, and I lived that. My classroom has been clear cut of my desktops. Kids are now using Chromebooks to try to do Excel and PowerPoint, which is useless in a business environment. I literally wept this week when someone sent me a picture and they're gone. You're starving our entire productivity. It's crazy.
David, I'm going to give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, look, we lived through 15 years of Liberals at the helm, devastating skilled trades, pulling trades out of the classroom. That's what we inherited when we formed government. Today, we've seen an increase in youth registration and apprenticeships. We've seen a 30%. I mean, let's not let facts get in the way of a story here, because we've seen a 30% increase factually in women registration and apprenticeships. We're creating new opportunities like the next generation of youth at the Music Hall in Port Hope. You know, Albert Schultz, the team there with support from the Architectural Conservancy, have funding from this government. We talked about it last night, over $2 million to train a next generation of cement masons who will learn from Rod Stewart and so many others in our community. I think to junior achievement and John McNutt at St. Mary's, a next generation of youth. You know, apprenticeships were never promoted under previous NDP and Liberal governments. Today, they are.
We are starting to get off a little bit from the initial question, but Max, we'll go to you for the final word on this before we move on to our next question.
Yeah, I just wanted to push back on the idea that Doug Ford is a leader of any sort. More than 60% of Ontario didn't even vote last election. That doesn't sound like a leader of the people to me. I've been in the workforce for over 20 years. I was a union leader. Nobody thinks Doug Ford is on their side.
Thank you very much for the discussion on our first question. We're going to move on to First Nation communities. Inside the riding boundaries of Northumberland-Peterborough South sits two First Nation communities, Alderville and Hiawatha. How will your government work with these two First Nation communities to ensure they remain prosperous, independent, and sustainable communities? And we start this time with Dorothy.
The best way to start any sort of solutions or problem solving, and I've taught this to students, I've taught this to my employees, is listening. All right, you can't offer solutions unless you actually have intense conversations with the people who have the concerns. I'm not sure how much that has been happening. Obviously, if there's unhappiness, then yeah, obviously it hasn't. So step one, listening, defining what the problem is, and then looking for solutions, not from us. All right, we need to know the solutions from the community members. We need to see what best practices occur in other communities with similar issues. The more collaboration, and not just our level of government, municipal government, the local Indigenous governments, the federal governments, the more people you bring into the process that have the right ideas, and across party lines. I look at a community like Kingston, which is thriving because they've not necessarily removed the partisanship, but no one has the market cornered on good ideas. So listen, collect resources, collaborate, and then have a community-based solution to come up with the problem solutions.
Thank you, Dorothy. David, your answer to the first question, or the first question regarding First Nations.
Yeah, thanks, York. I would echo the listen and learn piece. I think to my first time sitting down with Hiawatha First Nation when I spoke with Chief Carr about her community and about those needs. So I think any good public policy starts with relationships, with relationship building, listening, learning from the stories. You know, we heard from abroad rural Ontario that had been left behind by previous Liberal governments, and investments that were needed. So take Potash Street, for example, complete repairs, support of the water system under Premier Ford and this government. The economic development, I mean, some really innovative opportunities for youth in First Nation communities, working with the creation of an economic development corporation there led by and for Indigenous leaders. I think to IBW 353, locally based out of Oshawa, but when they said, you know, we're not seeing a number of Indigenous in our Pathways program, they developed a mobile training truck funded through me as Labour Minister by our ministry that's going in to First Nation communities. So these are tangible things that we've done, that I've done as our local member, and I think beyond to the Ring of Fire, to working in partnership with Chief Duncan Michano at Bictagong First Nation, the largest caribou agreement ever, working by and with. It started with just a relationship with that chief, and then we signed the largest caribou deal in Ontario's history. You know, I'm a big believer in the relationships, relationship building, and that's how you start it. And, you know, we're never going to realize the potential of Ontario if not recognizing the fastest growing youth population, Indigenous youth. And I'm looking forward to continuing to work with Indigenous leaders in the months and years ahead.
Thank you very much, David. Maxwell, your response to our question about working with First Nations communities.
Indigenous leaders are the original stewards of this land. When I think of creating a society that lasts 7 generations and beyond, it's all about sustainability. It's about protecting our land, our watersheds, and just following their lead in making sure that we're engaging stakeholders.
Thank you very much. And Bruce?
Thank you. One of the things I really enjoyed when I taught at the old Coburg East and at CCI were some of the relationships I made with some of the Indigenous students and their parents in the community. And I in no way can speak for that community. I'm not part of that community. I've learned a lot about their community from them. What I need to do is learn more. What I need to do is figure out what is our role in their lives. We can't top down the Indigenous population in Ontario. We need to make sure that they are equal partners. We need to listen to what they want. I think, as in many communities, we need to look to the youth. I met so many wonderful young people, in particular in Alderville, and I got to coach some amazing ball players up there who taught me to become a better coach by what they could do. I learned about how to care in a different way. That's what we got to continue to do. We need to listen to them. We need to work and put the youth first if that's what they want. Listen to the elders. And they know better than we do who are their leaders, and we just have to be really good, solid partners with them.
Thank you very much, Bruce. We'll now open it up for discussion. David?
Yeah, look, I think that this is an important topic, and I'm glad to see that there's a lot of consensus around this table, or along the importance of listening, of learning, of teachings of 7 generations. And I think for all of us, we can commit to doing better in our own community. I'm a product of my own upbringing and our own education system, and I'm glad to see youth today learning about Hiawatha First Nation, about Alderville First Nation. I'm glad to see the important role that we're playing. I think to the book Chief Carr gave me on the history of Hiawatha that talked about the Potash brothers, the Johnson brothers, 2 of the sharpest shooters in world wars, who then came back to a country that didn't even recognize their citizenship or give them the ability to vote. I mean, these are some of the things that we can commit to improving on, but it starts with that relationships, and I think we're all committed to listening, to learning, and to deepening both our collective understanding, but improving for our next generation and for youth across Ontario.
It is good to see that commitment across the board. We will move on to our next topic, which is healthcare. There will be 3 questions under this topic. Question number 1, where does your party stand on private healthcare? Is there a place in Ontario for private healthcare to help offset the backlog of surgeries and medical appointments? And we start with David.
Yeah, thanks, York. I mean, we've been very clear as a government that you'll pay with your OHIP card, and we'll continue to make supports in healthcare. I mean, you heard from my own history. I worked for the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. And we have to think outside the box when it comes to new models of care. And you'll hear opponents constantly use the boogeyman of privatization because they want to exacerbate the status quo, because they don't want to think outside the box. I mean, we lived through cuts to residency positions of doctors, cuts to nursing positions under the McGuinty-Wynne government, and we can't go back. I mean, these are generations of youth that weren't given the opportunity to learn. And now we've expanded that, expanded residency seats, expanded nursing seats, 3 new medical schools under construction, and we're bringing care closer to home. So allowing diagnostic testing. I think to family who've had cancer, going into the hospital. Why do you have to go there for your blood work when you can go to a community clinics closer to you? So we're doing that, and we've lowered the wait times for hip and knee and cataract surgeries as a result, getting more people seen closer to home, thinking outside the box, bringing care closer to communities like the Rural Outreach Hub in Colborne, expanding primary care in communities like Trent Hills. You gotta continue to think outside the box. Is there more to do? Without question. Healthcare will constantly, every day, every year, one has to strive to improve healthcare. After all, health is all we've got, and so we've got to continue to make efforts to improve it. And that's what we're doing here in our rural community.
Thank you very much, David. Next is Maxwell, your answer to our first question out of the topic of healthcare.
Thanks, York. Yeah, so healthcare-related debt is the #1 cause of bankruptcy in the United States. That is what happens when you run healthcare as a business. Healthcare is a human right. We need to fund healthcare. We need to put money into hospitals, and we need to pay a staff that actually supports their communities. I don't think there's any room for private practice in healthcare in Ontario.
Thank you, Maxwell. Bruce, your answer to our first question on healthcare.
Thank you. There's absolutely no place for private profit in public health care. We do not need private hospitals. We do not need private clinics. We do not need corporations renting nurses back to our hospitals at 3 times the cost of if we had hired those nurses directly to the hospitals. We need to have nursing ratios. We need to hire more nurses so that patients are safe, are getting the treatments they need, and the nurses are not burning out. Hallway medicine is the worst it's ever been. It started under the Liberals. The Conservatives threw gasoline on that fire. It is incredible how overcrowded our hospitals are. I volunteer in long-term care homes. And what I have seen is that the public homes have more people to work with the residents. The facilities are in better shape. The employees are happier. They're not as harried. And that's because there isn't a profit motive. All the money being used at home goes to the residents. It isn't going to shareholders' pockets. And we need to remove that. There's no place in Ontario for private profit on the backs of public money.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Dorothy, your answer to this first question on healthcare and private healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there seems to be a pattern of using the excuse of a crisis as a way of bringing in extreme measures. And the pandemic was a classic example of that. As Bruce mentioned, nursing agencies. Well, we absolutely have to have them because we have a crisis, and then suddenly that ends up being the normal. And we've got nurses that are working for private agencies making more money than they were, and yet the private agencies are also making money. I've taught business, I've taught math. When someone's making a wage and then it's more and then there's a profit, I think it's costing the government an awful lot more than had that service already been provided from a public space. We've got nurses that are fleeing the profession more than teachers are. It's not a happy place. It's not working. 2.5 million Ontarians without a family doctor, over 20,000 here in Northumberland-Peterborough South alone. That's not a system that's working.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. Now that everybody's had a chance to answer this question, we'll open it up for open debate. David, you had...
Yeah, I think that when I was first elected, I remember sitting down with Linda Davis at NHH, and she said, you know, David, the funding formula under the previous Liberal government was broken. They mistreated rural hospitals, small and medium-sized. So we listened. We rolled up our sleeves. We fixed the small and medium-sized hospital funding formula. The 2 largest base funding increases to both Campbellford and NHH have happened while I've been MPP under Premier Doug Ford and the Ontario PC Party. We're building 3 new medical schools. We're building more long-term care beds in this community than the previous Liberal government did in 15 years in government combined. I mean, they just said no to building outright. And that's an attitude reflected by other parties in this election when they just want to say no to building. So you have to build modern infrastructure, but that infrastructure is brought to life by the people that we're training a next generation of healthcare professionals.
Thank you, David. That actually leads us into our second question in healthcare. So question number 2 is the largest chunk of the Ontario budget goes towards healthcare. Currently, we are seeing long wait times to find a family physician. We are also seeing a shortage when it comes to doctors and nurses, as well as aging infrastructure. So how will your party relieve the pressure on the healthcare system? And this time we start with Maxwell Groves.
Thanks, York. We need to fund healthcare. Nurses are burning out, and unfortunately, we're still feeling the effects of the Mike Harris administration. We have this huge skills gap between new nurses coming in and veteran nurses that actually have the skills to keep our hospitals running. Hiring new nurses is great, but when you cap the wages of existing nurses, they're going to burn out, they're going to leave the profession, or worse, they're going to go to the United States where they can get paid a fair wage. And it's unacceptable to run our healthcare system like this.
Thank you very much, Maxwell, and Bruce LePage.
Thank you. It is well documented that we, over 2 million Ontarians don't have a doctor. That 20,000 in our community don't have a doctor. We need to hire doctors. We need to hire 3,400 new doctors right away. We need to hire 25,000 nurses right away. There are 12,000 foreign trained doctors in Ontario waiting for a residency spot. Residency spots are cheaper than medical schools. We can get them into residency and get them up to speed if they're training in Ontario very quickly. The government does spend a lot of money on healthcare. Of course they do. It's the biggest ticket. But where's that money going? Too much of it is going into insider pockets. When you have a private clinic offering a service that should be offered in a hospital, it costs more. You have to pay for all the same facilities, duplicated. You have to pay for all the same people, and then you have to pay for the profit on top for that company to do that job. We're seeing people have surgery wait times extended because there are not nurses available, because the nurses are leaving the profession, because the job is killing them. We need nursing ratios to make sure that they are safe, both physically and mentally. We need to pay them appropriately. Why are we paying nurses for hire from these corporations more than nurses who have dedicated themselves to public health care? What is broken in this system is what has been broken for a long time with Mr. Ford and the Conservatives, is they're more interested in siphoning public wealth into private pockets. And healthcare is where they're best at that, but we see in other areas too. But we need to stop that. There is enough money to hire doctors, to hire nurses, to hire the other professionals who keep our hospitals safe, to keep our families healthy, to have our hospitals in good repair. We just have to remove the profit motive from all of that.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Dorothy and Noronha, your answer to the question on relieving pressure on the healthcare system.
Absolutely. So the Liberal platform basically has a family physician for every Ontarian in 4 years. It's a $3 billion promise, about the same as what those $200 bribe checks cost us in February. I think it's a pretty good deal. Medical schools are great. When will we see that doctor? Probably in about 15 years. And what's to guarantee that those doctors will actually be going into family medicine? It's a calling. That is a calling in the sense that it's not compensated anywhere near to the effort that's being put forth. In fact, there's a lot of administration involved with that, which is why we're seeing lots going into the specialty practices instead. We are committed to removing that paperwork, something as ridiculous as the fax machine, which is still existing, to go to a central referral system so that family physicians can do the job that they're trained to and that they love to do. 2.5 million people, and projected to 4 million. That's absolutely the number one problem that needs to be solved.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. David Piccini, your response to the question on relieving the pressure on the healthcare system.
Thanks, York. I mean, you heard a lot of things about what we need to do, but what's lacking is a concrete plan to do it. So 3 points you got to do. 1, build the infrastructure. We've got, as I said, 3 new medical schools under construction. You could say it takes long. It does take long time to train doctors, which is why it was so detrimental and outright irresponsible that the previous Liberal government cut residency seats, cut nursing seats. 2, you have to help people. So how do you do it? How do you keep them in a rural setting? Well, I think to Dr. Ali, for example, at Trent Hills right now, new family physician we brought in through our practice ready assessment. Under previous Liberal NDP governments, you had the doctor driving the Uber. We've launched practice ready assessment. She's one of 768 that have gone through that practice ready assessment. She's now practicing in Trent Hills. Finally, you got to look to innovation, and you got to look to ways to innovate to get healthcare closer to home. So we're working to tackle, I agree, I think we all agree here, on the agencies. Those existed long before we were in government, and we're working on innovation with SEIU as an example. Their new staffing practice, it's a new app base that's helping reduce dependency on agencies. We see a near 0% dependency, according to my latest conversation with Susan Walsh, the CEO at Northumberland Hills Hospital. So this is a plan. And lastly, our Learn and Stay grant. How do you get them to rural Ontario? How do you get them to a rural community? Previous governments could have done this. They didn't. We did. We covered the tuition for doctors now practicing or nurses in an underserviced community. A great example of that is one of the new nurses with the Trent Hills Family Health Team.
Thank you very much, David. Now that everybody's had a chance to answer the question on relieving the pressure on the healthcare system, we'll open up for open debate. Dorothy, you had your hand up first.
You are the government, eh? 7 years. 7 years. The fact that we keep referring back to a government that's almost been 10 years ago, it's disingenuous at best. Health checks. So Shoppers Drug Mart and their health checks with a quota-based system. That's one of the gifts of our government right now. If things are so great, why did Minden close down? Why was my father-in-law sitting in the hallway for 3 days last week? This system is broken, and you've had 7 years. Thanks.
David, you have 1 minute to respond before we go to Bruce.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, look, I think by a Liberal candidate's own admission, it takes years to train a doctor. So I'd just love a yes or no answer on, was it irresponsible to cut residency positions, to prioritize out-of-country seats, something this Premier has said, we're prioritizing Ontario students, to cut nursing seats. So that's what we can expect. We know, because that's what Liberals did when they were in government. But you can do better, and I acknowledge lots has to be done in our healthcare system, but you have to think to innovative plans like I laid out to get foreign credentialed doctors practicing here in Canada. We're doing it. Dr. Ali in Trent Hills is a great example. You have to cover the tuition to incentivize people to stay in rural Ontario. We're doing it. And you have to build the infrastructure to train a next generation of doctors and nurses, and we're doing that as well.
Dorothy, we'll come back to you. Bruce.
I guess we'll go back to the Conservatives' comment that we seem to have a lot of good ideas, but we don't have any concrete plans. And that's a classic, perfect example of this government not listening. I laid out a plan. Our party has a wonderful plan for healthcare. Family health teams will reduce the paperwork for doctors to give them more time to work with their patients. We'll hire 3,400 more doctors, 25,000 more nurses. Everyone in Ontario will have access to a primary care physician within the first 4 years of our government. And it just comes down to more and more of the rhetoric from this government. They've been in place for 7 years. They could have fixed a lot of things in 7 years. What they did is they broke things more in 7 years. And we really need to get past the blaming past governments. I remember when I went to Teachers College in 1990, one of my classmates' wife was receiving a northern tuition fee at that time to become a doctor. So it has been in the past. The cons aren't doing anything new except lining pockets at a phenomenal rate.
Certainly an important topic for sure, and that is why we have a third question on healthcare. And this question deals with mental health. At what point in time mental health was a taboo subject to talk about openly? The stigma around someone suffering from mental health had many people suffering in silence and nowhere to turn for help. Thankfully, that stigma has been raised over the past several years. What is your party's platform when it comes to mental health? What will your party do to help address this issue? And what concrete plans will your party implement to help prioritize mental health? And we begin now with Bruce.
Thank you. This is really quite true to my heart. My last year of teaching, I spent on a mental health leave. The changes, the destruction of the schools and the world I'd worked in for 30 years got me to a point where I was so stressed I couldn't go to work. And that led to an early retirement for me. So this is very close to my heart. The NDP is going to increase by 20,000 the number of mental health professionals. We're going to increase access to youth, because we have a lot of students and a lot of young people who are experiencing incredible mental health issues that we didn't see when we were young. Perhaps they were there, but we didn't know they were there. We now know they were there. And we're going to reduce barriers for the LGBT plus community to mental health problems. A lot of times, members of that community do not feel safe going to seek mental health because of stigma attached still in some communities to who they are. In short, like everything else, the money is there. We can do it through public means, and we will have more mental health professionals, so people don't have to wait forever to get the help they need.
Thank you very much, Bruce. And now, Dorothy, your answer on dealing with mental health.
Absolutely. I was really, I'm usually really happy when you say no notes, no binders, no whatever, because if I'm a bad student in the sense that I sometimes don't do my homework, but I have a really good memory. I got a wonderful 19-page document in my email, and that was the fully funded Liberal platform. And there were things in there that made me run to this interview. One of them was that mental health will be OHIP. It will be completely included under OHIP versus the struggles that people have to try to manage that on their own. Secondly, education has been robustified, if I can make a word. Holy cow, $1,500 per student funding completely coming back first. Those professionals that we lost by 1,000 cuts. These last 6 years have been horrific in the school system. Every time you turn around, oh, another CYW gone, oh, another ECE gone, yeah, the library's not going to be the library anymore. That's okay, we'll manage. MacGyvers, all of us. ECEs are coming back. CYWs are coming back, and you have no idea as a teacher how that allows you to focus on the job. But for students, it's like a collective sigh of, okay, I have some place to go. So rather than treating a crisis, we're potentially avoiding a crisis by having those supports in the classroom. Like I said, I didn't have this. I'm calling everybody. Like it's such a relief, and I'm so hopeful going forward that this is something that's actually going to get the attention that it deserves. It's like the best day.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. David, your response to your party dealing with prioritizing mental health care.
Yeah, York, I'm glad we're all talking about it and rolling out plans. I think we may differ on how to get there up on the stage here tonight, but we all agree we have to do more for mental health. I mean, we started when we took office by being, I think it's the first province in Canada to have a dedicated minister for mental health and well-being. But we've backed it up with a plan, because you got to have a plan. And our Roadmap to Wellness is the largest funded mental health initiative. But what does that all mean here locally? I mean, the manifestation of that locally is we have a youth wellness hub. We announced that. The first rural one in Ontario, to my knowledge, announced here in Port Hope to help youth get the support that they need. I think the programs with Rebound, Child and Youth Services here locally, their Night Stop program, helping youth at risk of homelessness, issues with affected and associated with mental health, getting them the supports that they need. I think to embedding in our police officers the MHEART, that's an acronym, but for folks watching at home, it's simply put, the cops in a cruiser would have a clinician with them to help someone at risk of homelessness who may be suffering from mental health and addictions issues, get them that clinical support that they need to get them access to care. But I think what's not been said is the connection all of this has to jobs. You need to have a strong economy to pay for this, and a strong economy to create jobs so that people have a sense of purpose, of self-worth, of well-being. And so I think there's an important jobs connection here as well for our next generation.
Thank you, David. And Maxwell, your response to dealing with the mental health crisis.
Let's be clear, mental health is healthcare. It should be fully funded by OHIP. Earlier we talked about Indigenous issues. Mental health goes hand in hand with that. When you're dealing with intergenerational trauma, you need mental health supports. Farmers have unique needs. They also need mental health supports. I worked in public health for 6 years. We studied what leads people to get an HIV transmission, and oftentimes it comes down to mental health. If you're having a mental health crisis, you have riskier behaviors. You'll have sex without contraception, you'll share needles. It all comes down to mental health. Mental health is one of the best interventions we have in healthcare.
Thank you very much. Now that everybody's had a chance to answer the question, again, I get the impression along the same lines as our Indigenous question. Everybody seems to be on the same page just how to get there. So we'll move on to our next question, or did you want to carry on with open debate?
Yeah, again, it seems like we're talking again about treating the symptoms versus the root causes. And I'm actually going to put a question forward to my candidate candidate to the left. And so this program you're talking about, is this a new program?
Yeah, the Youth Wellness Hub was something we did working with people in the community. I think to Northumberland Hills Hospital, to advocacy I had from that community, the mayor of Port Hope who stepped up to support that. I think to the Rebound program. You know, I think a lot of this is community-based solutions. I don't believe in a top-down approach. I think a lot of these organic solutions come from community, and so we've worked with Rebound. We've worked with Northumberland Hills Hospital. We've worked with our local police officers as well, just to understand the challenges that they're dealing with, and we have a plan to support them with funding.
Yeah, so my question, so does it exist now, or is it going to exist?
That
confused.
exists now. MHeart
Oh,
exists now.
okay.
Rebound programming.
Well, I know about
exists
Rebound,
now.
I just wasn't so.
I do the kilometers for kids. Everybody watching in the fall, I encourage you to come out and enjoy. I always go with my dog Max. But I do agree with what others have said on root cause and looking at creating, you know, strong, vibrant communities with jobs, with opportunities for youth, and those that do, because you have to have a strong social net for those that fall through the cracks, and we do have that, and we constantly need to improve, which is why I'm proud of the innovative funding that I've brought to this community and that we've seen with MHeart, that embed a clinician with the cops, but also with Rebound, a great organization helping youth.
Thank you, David. Bruce, you had something to add?
I do. Root causes are so important, and many of the root causes we're seeing in our communities have been exacerbated by the current Ford government. Minimum wage does not cover the cost of an apartment in any community in Ontario. So how can you be mentally healthy when you can't afford, you're working all day, all the time, maybe 2 jobs, you can't afford your own apartment. Our schools are decimated. There are not as many caring adults looking out for our children as there used to be. That was the real thing. Schools were always safe places. Not so much anymore. There are not enough, classrooms are overcrowded, we're fighting over supplies, we don't have the supportive personnel that teachers rely on 100% to make schools work. We don't have housing people can afford. All those things were caused by the Ford government or exacerbated by the Ford government, and we really need to fix those root problems, and then we can move at crisis care.
David, I'll give you a chance to respond to that, and then Dorothy will come back to you. Good? Okay. David, did you want to respond?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm glad we brought up minimum wage, because I think we've seen in the past an opportunities to index that with...
This what we're talking about is the mental health.
And the root causes, though,
so.
a job. And I've underscored the importance of having that strong job so that we don't run the risk. Because I do think your income, your ability to provide for one's family does have an impact on their mental health and their well-being. And so this government, has guaranteed stable, predictable increases to that, and that's an important component, while also, investing in youth programming to support youth here in our own community, to give them opportunities. Seniors, we haven't talked about senior isolation, their own mental health. I think to the seniors community programming that we're supporting at the new senior center we built in Port Hope or in Cobourg at the CCC. This is just some small examples, but I don't want to leave out seniors in this conversation as well.
Max, did you have something to add on the mental health aspect of this?
I just wanted to push back on the whole idea that sending police officers to deal with someone who's having a mental health crisis is a good idea. People who are having mental health crises don't want to deal with police officers. They're afraid of police. Sending someone with a gun to deal with someone who's having a crisis just escalates the situation. That's not how we should be addressing mental health issues.
I have to correct the record here. That's exactly why we funded the MHeart program, because before it was just police officers. And we know from Chief Vandergraaf, from our OPP detachment, you can't police your way out of it. That's why we're funding a clinician embedded in often our first responders who are first on the scene to these calls. So we have that nurse, we have that clinician embedded in it. We know others here want to defund police, but I think there's an important role that those officers spend first to the scene, but we've embedded the clinician in to get that clinical support, because I agree with the Green Party candidate that you can't just send a police officer. That's why we funded that program.
Max, you have something to add?
Unfortunately, he's missing the point. If you're still bringing police officers that have guns, you're escalating the situation. It's not the right way to deal with it.
Bruce?
Yeah, I spent a year walking past the encampment in Brookside and through downtown Coburg. Massive amounts of homelessness in the past year. I've never seen a clinician. Sometimes I would see EMS come, but there always was a cop all by themselves, right? And it scares people when they see a police officer. We know death by police officers is epidemic in mental health circles. These, they don't react the way the police want them to react, and so the police react the way police react. As far as defunding police, that's always a dog whistle from the right. What that really means when you look at what's going on, some of the money being spent on weaponry and militarizing the police can be better spent on having
That is another topic too, right?
Right,
and
thanks.
there are so many different elements to the mental health crisis. It's not something that's going to be solved in this debate here today. This is going to bring us up to the end of our first half of this debate. Please don't go away. We'll be right back with more of Your Vote, Your TV's extensive coverage of the 2025 provincial election. Welcome back to Your Vote, Your TV's extensive coverage of the 2025 provincial election. Joining us today from the Green Party is Maxwell Groves, from the NDP, Bruce LePage, from the Liberal Party, Dorothy Noronha, and from the Progressive Conservatives, David Piccini. We're going to move on in the second half to agriculture. Northumberland-Peterborough South, like many rural areas in Ontario and across Canada, is seeing the age of the persons working on the farm increasing every day. No longer are we seeing farms being passed down from one generation to the next. What we are seeing is family farms being sold or their operations closed completely. As a newly elected MPP for the riding, what are your plans to help attract the younger generation back into the agriculture industry and keep the family farms alive, profitable, and operational? This time we are starting with Dorothy.
Thank you. It's actually interesting. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. When I did my Master's of Education, one of the courses I took was Green Economies, and so I actually did a very extensive research project on aging, on the crisis we have in farmers aging out of the profession without the traditional 5 or 6 children that you'd have to pass that on to, and how this is it's kind of chaining them to I guess. A situation that they can't sell out because there aren't any others to buy into that. We need to do a much better job of getting communication networks across at least our province, even across the country, in terms of matching existing farmers with potential farmers. And some of those maybe not in the traditional ways. I mean, just kind of putting your farm up for sale and hoping someone like you will get that. Well, this could be someone coming in from outside of Canada that has that training. It could be new people coming out of schools, which brings me to schools and the drastic defunding that occurred with our current government. Pretty much as soon as they took over, to turn around and say, yeah, we're reducing your tuition rates by 10%. Most of us would have assumed that would be the government covering that 10%. No, it was telling post-secondary institutions, reduce your tuition by 10%, which means reduce your revenue stream by 10%. And anybody with any degree of logic would then say, well, they either have to cut or they have to find other revenue streams. Guess what happened? They found other revenue streams in the form of international students. So to blame that on anything but a reduction in revenue is, and I'm going to use the word again, disingenuous. And now we're seeing the cutting of programs. So places like Guelph, that could be, the University of Guelph, that could be increasing the number of agricultural students, is decreasing them.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. David Piccini, your response or answer to the question on keeping family farms alive.
Yeah, I mean, we were proudly from an agricultural community where farmers, farmers feed cities. And so, they play such an important role in our community, and they, have disproportionately dealt with federal carbon tax and things that are affecting their bottom line and their ability, I think, to grain elevators and the cost associated with that. And so you've got to really look to supporting our farmers and ways you can do that. So one, our risk management fund. I know this was an ask of most of our, all of our commodity organizations, all of the farming, both the Northumberland Federation of Agriculture, among a number of others. We increased the risk management fund, which covers losses. We've supported the next generation of training through the skills development fund. I was really heartened to see the NDP in their platform commit to continuing funding of the skills development fund, recognizing what an important and good fund that is from Premier Ford and our government. Increasing processing capacity. I think to the past, over years, processing capacity decreased. We've got to increase that ability because we're, cattle crossing the province, stuck in gridlock on our highways. So you've got to grow our processing capacity so that people in our farms, I think to Tim Klompmaker in Norwood, I think to the DeYoung turkey farmers here in our, in the county of Northumberland. I think to Ben Corelli and his grain elevator. You have to start with first recognizing the formative role they play, not taxing them to death or taking their land for solar farms, which are things we saw in the past, and really let them harness their growth. Yields are up, which is a positive thing. And through funding, we've done working with the federal government, we're funding innovative technology and new ways to get our crops to market.
Thank you very much, David. Maxwell Groves, your response to agriculture industry here in Northumberland-Peterborough South.
Thanks, York. We need to take a multi-pronged approach. As Dorothy said, the education aspect is huge. When I was in high school, we were all told, go into IT, that's where the money is. No one mentioned farming. We need to make farming more attractive to young people so that they take agricultural courses in post-secondary. When I worked at the Bowden farm, they were very clear. Wisconsin was one of their biggest enemies. We're constantly undercutting our farmers with American goods and American food inputs. So taking the pressure off farmers from our neighbors from the south is also a big factor. And lastly, mental health. As I said before, farmers have unique mental health challenges. When you have a herd, you can't go off to the clinic to have your own health needs met. So making sure that mental health supports are in place for farmers is huge because that'll help make farming more attractive throughout the generations.
Thank you very much, Maxwell. Bruce LePage, your response to keeping farms alive, profitable, and operational.
Thank you, York. I had an uncle who was a beef farmer in Northern Ontario. He was Uncle Bruce, so it was confusing, that family stuff. But I remember when I was like a young teenager, we used to go up to, I was in Nova Scotia, but we always returned to my father's family area in Northern Ontario in the summers. And one day Uncle Bruce came to myself and my brother, who was a year younger, and said, we're starting haying. Do you want to come along and see what it's like? We said, oh yeah, that sounds cool. Like, we've never done this before, right? Suckers, yeah. So by lunchtime, I was dead. And I said, and I remember going to my mother and saying, oh my God, I can't do this. I could never work this hard day in and day out. And so the next day I went fishing. That was it. That was my foray into farming, other than growing tomatoes in my backyard. Now, I like Dorothy's idea of matching farmers with farms. We need to do that. But to do that, we need to keep farmland being farmland. We have to make sure that agricultural land is not bought up by developers and turned into tract housing. We do not need more ticky-tack on the hillside. So keep it inland. I spoke recently with Brian, who's the president of the OFA. I met with him a couple times in the past couple weeks, got to know a lot about his life. And he said the greatest pressure on farmers right now is protecting their land from developers. Whether it's being pressured to sell, and money, money's money, and they're trying, a lot of farmers are running on a margin. So there's this money, but they want to be farmers. Farmers want to farm. He had with him a young dairy farmer from just north of Belleville in one of our meetings, and this fellow is surrounded by subdivisions. He cannot upgrade his farm because of setbacks put on by the municipality. We need to look at innovation. We need to look at greenhouses for winter, and we need to remove the Ford carbon tax. We didn't have a carbon tax in Ontario until Mr. Ford tore up the cap and trade agreement.
Thank you very very much, and thank you all for your answers. Everybody's had a chance to answer now. We'll open up the floor for open debate on agriculture. David, you have your hand up first, and then we'll come to Dorothy.
Yeah, I think I would agree with the discussion around education. I want to just mention, important to mention his name. He's left us and passed, but Darryl Cramp, who was a federal member of parliament and a provincial member of parliament, one of my mentors actually, in Hastings, Lennox, Addington. Darryl brought in agriculture into the curriculum, and I think that's important in rural communities like mine. I was up in Campbellford in the trades class the other day, and I met with a trades teacher, and often the best apprentices and tradesmen and women come from farm families. And you have to create an awareness. So, we introduced protections on farm from, activists who came onto the farm and have introduced protection for those farmers, introduced agriculture back into the curriculum to really foster that understanding that farmers feed cities. And with the tariffs threats from south of the United States, I think it's an opportunity for us to double down on support for our farmers in our agriculture sector.
Thank you, David. Dorothy, we'll let you continue the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting back to preserving farmland, there's never been a flurry of MZOs like what we have seen in our existing government. And as much as the municipality says, yeah, we would like this to remain, in flies that MZO, and no, that's not what's going to be happening. I think we really, really need to be a lot more judicious with those versus dropping them as soon as a developer feels that they can make a lot of profit on a piece of land. And yes, it was the dog-forward carbon tax, 100%. We had a cap and trade system. Money was pouring into our schools from California. The purchase orders, you couldn't fill them fast enough because of cap and trade and money coming in. And we didn't have a carbon tax because we had a plan that was better. So thank you, Mr. Ford, for giving us the carbon tax.
David, we'll come back to you. Bruce, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to, again, this whole, Donald Trump and, quick whip of his crayon, and we have threat of tariffs. This is a great opportunity for many things. One is to open east-west trading of agricultural products across Canada. It's harder to sell food to our neighboring provinces than it is to sell to Michigan or to New York, and that's absolutely ridiculous. And I know there's work being done on that. There's a lot more work to be done on that. The NDP government also has in their plan direct protection for farmers and farms if they are affected by tariff. In fact, in the form of direct payments to them to keep them going while we work through the changes in our world. And we're no longer going to be a north-south trading country. We're going to be an east-west and an overseas trading country.
Thank you very much. Bruce, David, you wanted to respond.
Yeah, really important point on breaking down interprovincial trade barriers. It's critical. I mean, we forget that often our wineries in both the county to the east of us, we've got some wineries here. Our federal member has a winery in Orono. We've got wineries in southwestern Ontario and Niagara, and you think how crazy it is that we can't have BC wine here and take Ontario wine to BC. So without question, have to break down interprovincial trade barriers as well. But I would just say, I mean, from time at the Labour Farm to recent conversations with our grain farmers, nobody believes about what folks are saying with respect to the carbon tax. I mean, this is a Liberal carbon tax brought in by the same folks that brought the carbon tax here in Ontario, migrated to Ottawa. It's killed jobs, it's driven inflation, and it is having a very real impact on the price of food and pocketbook issues, people's ability to afford food. And it's the biggest job killer. The worst thing we've ever seen is the Liberal carbon tax.
Thank you, David. Dorothy, your response.
So why did you bring it in? We had cap and trade. There was absolutely no reason to go to a federal carbon tax. That's a default if you didn't have a plan in Ontario. And first thing you did, cap and trade, money stopped pouring in to fix our infrastructure, to fix our schools, which are now crumbling even more than they did before. 7 years to fix wine traveling from BC. 7 years. You are the government. All I got.
I would just,
David, would you like
say, I mean, this is sort of often what you hear. You brought in a carbon tax. Factually incorrect. Folks watching at home know you can go on to the Ontario Legislative Assembly. You'll not find a single legislative package of this government bringing in a carbon price. What you will see is the previous Wynne-McGuinty government bringing in a price on carbon. And that's really, when I hit the doors and I speak to people up in rural Ontario, when you get up to second, third, fourth line, you see a lot of PC signs up there because those people have been crippled with the price on carbon. And we're the only party here in this election that's lowered the price at the pump, that's concerned about pocketbook issues, and that have said we will never implement a job-killing carbon tax.
Thank you, David. Bruce, you have more to add.
It's completely disingenuous by our PC candidate here at the table to say that the Ford government did not bring in a carbon tax. They did by default by their actions. We had a plan in place that brought money into Ontario. It was a great plan. It worked wonderfully for the people of Ontario, but it didn't work for Doug Ford and the people that he works for some reason, which are not clearly the people of Ontario. So when he scrapped the carbon tax, the default went back to the federal tax. And you can blame it on the Liberals, but everyone in Ontario, if they spend the time, they know that it's Doug Ford who did this to us. As far as the cost of food, the NDP is going to bring in a monthly stipend to help people fight the inflation brought on by the lack of competition in our groceries. That Mr. Ford is quite happy to let Mr. Weston get richer and richer and richer. This will be needs-based and will be based on the rate of inflation month to month. It won't be a one-time bribe check. It'll be every month for families who need it to help them pay for their food.
Thank you, Bruce. Maxwell, you had something to add.
I also wanted to push back on just the idea of using fossil fuels for things like drying grain and stuff. Why are we not investing in tools like heat pumps? Why are we not making that more accessible for farmers to make sure that they can transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy?
David, did you want to respond before we move on to the next question?
Things. I mean, if you've spent, anyone who's spent some time with farmers knows you can't dry your grain with a heat pump. You know, you've got to get out, understand these issues, and the idea that we drive inflation through massive government policies, taxation on people who have no other choice than to drive their kid to hockey or drive to work, drive an hour. We live in a rural community, and then our answer is let's give government. Let's have food subsidies. I mean, think of the world we're in now, where we're talking about food subsidies because we've driven up the price. The best way is just don't have a job-killing carbon tax in the first place. Work with industry, like the PC government's done, to decarbonize with steel factories in Hamilton. Those are big emissions. Stop punishing Grandma Betty and mums and dads taking their kids to the Cobourg Community Centre with a carbon tax and a price at the pump.
So we are going to move on to the next question. We got a little bit off here, which just shows the importance and the widespread effect of agriculture here in Northumberland-Peterborough South. Next, we're going to talk about education. There'll be two questions under this topic, and I do ask, please stick to the answering the question that is being asked. We'll give everybody a chance to talk. First question under the education heading is, next to healthcare, education might be the next biggest portfolio in the province of Ontario. Quite frankly, what is your party's plan on education? How does your party plan on improving the education system? And we start with David.
Thank you very much, York. A few things. I mean, education is so important. I'll stem back to my why I ran. You know, as a young person who grew up in this community, who wants to live, work, raise a family in our rural community. First you have to build schools. You have to have the infrastructure. I remember Bernadette Vanderhorst in Norwood on the picket lines fighting the closures to the schools. We saw hundreds of schools shut down in the past in rural Ontario. So you got to start by building it. And we're building it. We're building a new K-12 school in Newcastle, a new French immersion school here in Cobourg. This government has made a massive commitment to building schools. In the classrooms, back to basics. Folks watching at home, many of you will have done cursive writing. We're bringing that back to class. You will have done math, arithmetics, basic finance. I mean, to think that you'd have youth going through a system without any understanding of the dangers of debt, of credit cards. These are things we're bringing back into the schools. Pathways to apprenticeships. We saw the past taking trades out of the schools, bringing it back. I just spoke with Rob Cattle for bringing tool and die machines into our school. In our board, in fact, over 10 schools now have that. We've seen, I think it's 170 something he's brought tool and die CNC machines in to schools. Today, a pathway into an apprenticeship. You had to call, up until recently, the government to book your trades exam. We've digitized that, brought that online, and made it easier for youth to get into an apprenticeship and promoted it, because when you have a job in the trades, you have a career for life.
Thank you, David. I will let you know that the second question in education is going to go on to the post-secondary part, so we'll delve deeper into that. Maxwell, education.
You don't have to build new schools if you don't close them to begin with. Central Public School, closed. Dr. M.S. Hawkins, closed. The West, closed. This is what the Conservative government does. They try to find efficiencies and then they make cuts.
Thank you very much, Maxwell. Bruce.
Thank you. You know, I taught for over 30 years. So I remember when a former PC minister, Mr. Snowland, said quite infamously that he was going to create a crisis in education and then find ways to solve it. And we know that the long-term plan is to introduce some form of privatization to our system, whether it's through charter schools or vouchers. We know that is going to be the end game because that is the Tory game. Let's get public money into private hands. What are we going to do to fix the problem right now, the NDP? We are going to spend $830 million per year for the next 10 years fixing the backlog of repairs that exist in our schools. Some of these schools don't have proper water for the students to drink. They don't have proper heating. There's mold. There's leaking ceilings. We need to repair that. And then we've got to keep on top of the repairs as they happen instead of just backlogging them. Okay? We need to hire more teachers and more support personnel. That $1,500 per student that the Conservative government cut from the education budget meant classes are huge now. It meant we have fewer EAs and ECEs. We have fewer custodians to take care of our schools. We have fewer secretaries to run the school. We will immediately put that $1,500 per student back into the education budget, and then we were going to fix the funding formula that has been broken for such a long time to meet student needs first. So Snowden started the crisis, we will end it.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Dorothy, the Liberal Party's plan on improving the education system.
Thanks. So I became a teacher in 2006 for the very altruistic reason of getting a job closer to home. We moved to Campbellford, and I was working at North York General Hospital, and boy, I guess Teachers College, which was then only a year, figured, yeah, I can take a hit for a year and start teaching. It's now 2. By the way, we'll be bringing that back to 1, so I'm really excited about that. I would never, in a million years, ever considered becoming a teacher under a PC government. Mr. Harris was horrible to teachers. We have, and I don't like to use PTSD, but we definitely have some triggered teachers from teaching in those years. Under the McGuinty government, and specifically under Gerard Kennedy, he brought in the student success team. He brought in specialist high skills majors, the articulation agreements with colleges for things like for welding, for what's the one where they bend stuff and duct work?
Piccini?
Yeah, anyway, but so this was, yeah, no, HVAC, yeah, I got it. I know how to spell it too. These were all innovations that allowed me, I was working at CIS at the time, to get students re-engaged. Our graduation rate went from 67% to well over 80% in a few short years. It was a fantastic time to be a teacher. I was a business teacher at that time, bringing in skills to them. I've cranked out so many entrepreneurs out of my classroom, and now, well, I've quit now, but that literacy course, it's called BBI 2.0. We had 8 sections of it. Every kid that came through my class knew about credit cards. They knew about financial planning. They knew about all that sort of stuff. When was that course canceled? November of this past year, a week before I had grade 8s coming in. Canceled. So when they said, so what will it be taking in September? I don't know.
Thank you very much, David. Everybody's now had a chance, or sorry, Dorothy, everybody's had a chance to answer this. We can either open it up to debate or we can go on to the post-secondary part of this topic. We'll do that. All right, so we'll continue on the education portfolio, but shifting the focus to, as mentioned, post-secondary education. The cost of a post-secondary education is on the rise, and unfortunately it is pricing some students out of being able to afford to attend college or university. With so much emphasis in the workforce being put on having a post-secondary education, what is your party's plan to make sure that any student in the province of Ontario who wants to attend a post-secondary institution can do so? And Maxwell, we'll start with you.
We need to fund post-secondary education. We need to make sure that we have learning pathways in place so that anyone who wants to take up skills that are in demand in our country, in our province, can do so. I'm 36. I'm still paying off OSAP. Taking on debt isn't a great way to increase your quality of life, because once you graduate, you may make a couple extra bucks, but that debt is going to follow you from job to job to job. We can't keep putting the onus on the student. When our workforce is educated, it increases our economy. It's a value adder, and we can't keep putting the onus on students.
Thank you very much, Maxwell. Bruce.
Thank you, York. What we're going to do immediately is restore funding by at least 20% back to the universities and colleges so that they can once again provide the services, the education, and the training our students need. We will focus on all aspects. Community colleges will restore the programs that we need in skilled trades and healthcare. We need these kids trained. As far as funding it, we're going to fix OSAP. We're going to turn the loans into grants. The long-term plan is to make education like it is in many other countries in Europe, where it's fully funded by the government. Another part that people often miss, and I knew this, my son went to U of T from 2016 on, is the cost of housing. When students go away to school, it's often in a big center, and the cost of housing and trying to keep him housed was more than the cost of tuition. And so we need to make sure we have affordable, safe, clean housing close to the centers of learning so students can go to their classes, have a safe, warm place to come home to study and things other students do. But that's tied in. We can't forget that it's not just tuition, it's not just the funding of the programs, both incredibly important, but they need to have housing and they need to be able to afford decent groceries as well.
Thank you, Bruce. Dorothy, post-secondary education.
Yeah, absolutely. OSAP absolutely increased. No repayment until a student is making at least $50,000 a year. Absolutely restoring the funding back, not just the 10% cut, but actually looking at what it costs to maintain these programs and increase these programs. I'm not sure how did we get to cutting skilled trades? How do we get to cutting culinary programs? We're seeing it at Loyalist. We're seeing it at Trent. We're seeing it at Fleming. Like all of when I look at our youth and I see it. I've got grade 12s that are saying, yeah, I really wanted to do that program. It's not offered anymore. It's not offered anymore. It's full. Go back to my students that are in OYAP, not able to get apprenticeships, and that's when you look at paid internships, apprenticeships. These will be increased dramatically under the Liberal government. We are absolutely 100% reinvesting in youth for opportunities so they can have the good paying jobs that are currently being promised but aren't necessarily materializing.
Thank you, Dorothy. David, post-secondary education.
Thanks, York. I think you'll hear quite often that the simple answer to all of the woes is just fund more, just provide more money. According to that logic, we would have had good outcomes, and we would have seen that when I was first elected. We had the highest tuition in Canada when I was first elected. Kids couldn't even go to school because of the price of the tuition. And we now today, through a tuition reduction, that's bold moves, that's leadership to lower the tuition, because we don't work for the directors and folks in leadership within a university structure. We work for the people, for the families, for the youth that want to send their kids to a better school, and we're building them. I think to our 3 new medical schools that are coming in. I just spoke with a young gal in our community. I just actually had a picture sent to me from a young lad in Brighton whose dad sent me the picture. He wants to be a new doctor. He's going to go to a new medical school. He's applied to Toronto Metropolitan University's new med school while he was casting a ballot for me in advanced polls. These are the kinds of things we're doing in Ontario. We're tying funding to job placements. The way you fund a university and a college is through what's called a strategic mandate agreement. And we're tying those to experiential learning opportunities, to job placements. As the Premier's often said, and folks watching at home, we don't need to fund programs in basket weaving and other things. We need to fund programs for jobs, and that can get people into employment and into job outcomes. And we're also supporting micro-credentials, so small programs you can take to up your education to land a better job with a bigger paycheck, and we're making those OSAP eligible.
Thank you very much, David. Now that everybody's had a chance to answer the question on post-secondary education, we'll open it up to debate. Dorothy, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, I'm not sure when culinary studies became basket weaving, and I think there's a lot of my students that will take great exception to that. That 10% reduction in tuition came after you canceled free tuition. So under the Liberal government, there was a means tested, could be completely free based on family income. Bruce, I think Will ended up getting a portion, not the full, because my son, no, he didn't qualify because my husband and I we're both fully employed. I think Sally was working as an artist then. It was a great program, and I remember sitting on the stage at graduation, just as that new government had come in, and students saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to take a gap year. Oh, I'm going to take a year off," and my heart just dropped. And it's like, don't. They're literally. There's not, that program's not going to be around, and sure enough, bam, it was canceled that summer, and then our institutions were told to reduce their revenue by 10%. It was tragic.
Thank you, Dorothy. Bruce, did you have something to add?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, well, a couple of things. Money does cure a lot of ills, Mr. Piccini, especially in education, because it is an expensive endeavor to train the future. So it costs a lot of money. Yes, throwing money at schools, as you would phrase it, throwing money at post-secondary is an investment which gives back tenfold. Our NDP government will cover 60% of the cost of tuition budgets from the university's perspective, which is back to where it was when it was more manageable. So they will not have to find revenue streams they had before. Basket weaving is such a right-wing dog whistle. I almost came out of my skin when I heard that. We don't talk about basket weaving courses. There's no course a human takes to make themselves better, which is basket weaving. If you want to study literature, I want to talk to you. If you want to study carpentry, I want to talk to you. If you want to be a doctor, I need you in my community. If you want to be a plumber, I need you in my community. If you want to be an artist or writer, I want you in my community. Dog whistle. Wow.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Any further discussion? Okay, we are going to move on to our next topic, which I'm going to describe as issues affecting everyday Canadians. And there will be 4 questions under this topic. First question is homelessness, couch surfing, living paycheck to paycheck. They're all becoming words and statements that have become commonly used in this country, in the province, and right here in this riding. What are your plans to offer help, hope, and opportunity to the most vulnerable sector of our population? First on this question is Bruce.
Wow, that's a huge question. That's why I'm running. There are people who need help. There are people who need government to step in and do their job. The NDP government will immediately work towards 60,000 supportive housing units for our most vulnerable. So these will be a roof over their head, but also be the resources they need: mental health professionals, addiction specialists, financial specialists, retraining, wraparound 24/7, so they can get their lives back to where they were before whatever happened to them that caused them to be homeless. Paycheck to paycheck, we need to come up with a living wage rather than a minimum wage. We know now that the minimum wage doesn't match anyone's needs anywhere in Ontario. We need to move that to a living wage. We have to have stop gaps while we get there. So we will have this subsidy for groceries for families based on their need. We will build 200,000 affordable housing units. We will purchase existing rental units and turn them into co-op units, taking the profit margin out of households. If you can definancialize housing, people will have a better life. They will have less mental health issues. They'll have more time with their family. They'll have more money to be a human and experience life, and maybe weave a basket or two. I don't know. But there are things we can do. We can do these things. We can work towards ending homelessness. It has happened. Finland has a great plan to end homelessness. We can learn from them. Right? There are many things we can do.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Dorothy.
Yeah, there's so many aspects to affordability. It's difficult to know where to start. Housing obviously is the biggest chunk of anybody's expenses. We got to bring back in phased-in rent controls. The rents has gone out of whack where my son lives in Toronto. A one-bedroom apartment, $2,500 to $3,000. I don't even like telling kids what I paid in rent in Toronto when I was in our 20s. It's embarrassing, actually, and depressing for them. Never mind the concept of home ownership, which is a pipe dream. Again, we had a promise back in the day, right? We'll always do better than our parents. When my parents came here just after the war, my mom was a teller, my dad was a draftsman. They were not high-end occupations, yet after coming here with, of course, no money, they retired 53 and 49, 20 years of working, and they were able to retire. Both my brother and I, you went to university, that's what you did. We've broken that promise, and we've broken it hard, and we really have to get back to giving our youth hope again, and giving all the folks, like, if we're not, and we're all fine here in the sense that if prices go up, we could probably handle it. We're not fine until we're all fine. And right now, we're really not fine, not all of us.
Dorothy, thank you. David, your plans on the vulnerable sector of our population and helping them.
Yeah, I think without question, affordability is one of the big issues that I hear at the door when I go door to door talking with folks in our community. They're struggling to put food on the table, and they've lived, paycheck to paycheck. And we see this is across Canada. We've seen challenges. We've seen, encampments across Canada. And we have to do better, and without question, have to do better. And so I think it stems on a few things. Basic pocketbook issues, like, we've insured for people that have to drive to get to work. We've made our gas tax cut permanent, and we've done that. For those that want to get a better job with a bigger paycheck, we launched the Skills Development Fund, something now that, again, I was pleased to see in the NDP's platform. This is a fund to help people with better training. So for example, let's look at real life examples here. Habitat for Humanity in Baltimore. They've got a Skills Development Fund program that's helping young men and women whom I met when I was there learn a trade, do a pre-apprenticeship program, and actually build the homes that they're going to live in. We're doing it in the Sioux as well. When I was labor minister, it started there. We're seeing that right here in Northumberland County. We're working with our service providers, Northumberland County, the Elgin Park redevelopment. If you look at those sort of post-war homes there, in Cobourg to today, the new homes that have come in place, I don't believe that government and government alone should be in the business of building homes. I think we forget out there to the promise that folks have talked about here. My grandfather, who's an immigrant, who brought property. My dad, who doesn't have a pension to fall back on, but who bought a piece of property and is renting it out to folks. These are mums and dads in our own community who play an important role, and so we've got to encourage housing construction, reduce barriers, support deep affordable housing with our service system managers, and put more money back in people's pockets.
Thank you, David. I will say that housing is also a part of this subject matter that we will get to. Maxwell, your party's position on helping the vulnerable sector in our society.
Yeah, so you're looking at it. I grew up working class. I decided to go to the city to get an education. The majority of my OSAP debt was for housing. After I graduated and I entered the learned workforce, as I said, I started working as a teenager. My biggest bill was housing. While I was saddled with that debt for previous housing, I split a house with 2 roommates. We displaced a young family from being able to settle down and have kids because that was the cheapest way for us to live. My housing situation changed in the spring, and it costs over $2,000 for a studio apartment in Toronto, so I came back to Northumberland. The whole reason why I'm here running is because someone like me who did everything right wasn't able to keep up with the cost of living. We absolutely need to have a housing first strategy. And if I can't make it in the city, how can someone on OW or ODSP even have a chance?
Okay, we're just going to continue on with that part into the next question, which does have to do with housing, where for many Canadians, owning a home is out of reach due to skyrocketing prices, not only here in this riding, but also across the country. Want to know, what is your party's housing strategy? How will this strategy alleviate the shortage of housing, and how will your housing strategy protect against urban sprawl? And we are starting with Dorothy.
Thanks very much. The best way to prevent urban sprawl is to attack the urban problem. And one of those is through zoning. Well, fourplexes, why aren't they the rule? It's during my door knocking, and I'm sure all of us have been to New Amherst, beautiful building, and I'm looking at it and I'm counting, wait a minute, 1, 2, there were six units in one building. And when you looked at it, it was a beautiful building. Fourplexes do not mean blight. Fourplexes do not mean, skyscrapers outside. Like, we have to normalize that. I mean, if anyone's been to Europe and you look at the creative and beautiful ways that you can house, yet the only solution right now is the McMansion out on the outskirts, and it's gonna be 4,000 square feet, and it's gonna cost you $2 million. We've got to have a little bit more ingenuity than that, and it doesn't take an awful lot. In terms of the actual financial measures that the Liberal government is looking at, is eliminating the land transfer tax for first home buyers, but also for seniors that are downsizing. Looking at getting rid of the development charges that are passed on to the buyer. That doesn't mean that they're gone, they're just going to be funded in a way that just makes more sense versus just slapping it right on to the individual who can't afford it the most. And in some cases, that'll be $170,000 in reduction on the cost of a home.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. David, housing strategy.
Yeah, thank you very much, York. To get more housing, we can't forget that there's a lot of infrastructure underground to support housing and to support housing construction. That's why the Ford government, the PC government, has made historic investments, whether it's water investments right here in Cobourg, over 30 million. Brighton, Brighton was at the point where they literally couldn't expand, and they needed that support. And that's how we let things go in rural Ontario in the past. And so now we've seen the new water tower in Hastings. Just look up, the new water tower in Port Hope. The new water tower in Norwood. These are all core infrastructure, water and wastewater infrastructure, to support housing growth. We're also supporting densification with transit-oriented communities in the GTHA, so more people can live above a transit stop. Anyone who's been to Toronto, look at all those transit stations that have nothing above it. Now, not anymore. In Ontario, we're supporting growth in public-private partnerships above transit stations. The largest public transit investment in Ontario's history is happening under Premier Ford. But it's not just happening in Toronto. Think about the Northlander back in Northern Ontario. Think about two-way all-day go to folks in Clarington and eastern portion, or the western portion of our riding. We're allowing second and third units as a right. We heard some personal stories. I'll share with you mine, my wife and I. It was about converting the basement unit into an apartment to help pay the mortgage. Second and third units as a right are happening. If fourplexes were the silver bullet solution, why in the city of Toronto, where we've had fourplexes as a right, why haven't we seen the housing problem solved? And the answer is it's not quite that simple.
Thank you very much, David. And Maxwell, your party's view on strategic housing.
Well, as I said, we need to take a housing first strategy. The Greens want to build over 2 million new homes in existing urban boundaries. We also want to build 250,000 new co-op and affordable homes and 60,000 supportive homes. We don't need to pave over farmland. We have a transit corridor in our town, and yet there's hardly any homes around it. We need to build more missing middle housing, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. Dorothy made a great example of a quadplex that she saw, but I also want to point out there's a sixplex on Dale Road, and it's a beautiful building. It fits right in with all the houses around it. These are the sort of housing we need to build, and we need to build it as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Maxwell. And Bruce.
Thank you. Government used to be in the business of building homes, affordable homes for people to start out with. But successive, back in the 90s, the federal Liberals and the provincial Conservatives stopped building homes. They got out of the business whatsoever. We need to get back in the business of building affordable housing. It doesn't have to be profit driven. There is a role for that, for someone who wants their $2 million home. Absolutely go for it. It's never going to be me. It's probably not going to be Max. But there's a role for that. But there's a role for us to build housing, to build publicly owned housing that is quality built, that is dense, that is infilling in current boundaries so that we can use current infrastructure, we can use current transit lines, people can maybe walk to work, kids can walk to school. We need to have those communities become tighter again, not going into farmland. So we will stop farmland becoming subdivisions. We will stop that urban sprawl by simply doing that. Farms will not turn into subdivisions. We will put back in rent control. We will close the loopholes like rent eviction and family moving back in to make sure that people cannot be bounced out. Rent will be tied to the unit, not to the tenant. So you leave, they can't jack the rent. Okay? We are going to buy existing properties and turn them into co-ops, not-for-profit co-ops. We will invest in municipal transportation back to a 50-50 sharing level with the municipalities to improve transit within municipalities. We will expand Go Transit in all directions. For homeowners now who are struggling with heating costs, we will have grants for new heat pumps up to $19,500 based on financial need, and money above that will be interest-free loans.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the third question under the topic of topics that affect everyday Canadians. I will let you know, though, as we are getting close to time, we are going to shorten the length of time for each answer to 1 minute so we can get as many questions in as possible. Question 3 under affecting most Canadians. One of the most vulnerable sectors of people in the province are those that rely on the Ontario Disability Support Program, or ODSP. Individuals who are on ODSP can receive up to $1,368 per month for their basic needs and shelter costs. While on ODSP, they can make an additional $200 net income. Do you believe that people can live on this amount each month? And does your party plan on raising the ODSP payment? And we start with David.
Yeah, thanks, York. ODSP, I've worked with a number of residents in this community as MPP who live on ODSP, and I want to just say a few things. One, we introduced as a government, previous governments could have, they didn't. We did introduce and index it with inflation. Largest increase in ODSP in modern history, and that is indexed with inflation. So we don't always have to come back to the legislature to address that. I would also say I don't believe, and perhaps it may be a slight ideological difference, but I don't believe that the answer is solely just around government and government support. And I'll reflect back on stories I've heard from those who work at Melly's Cafe, who've had the ability to earn more within their ability, because we focus on their abilities, not their disabilities. And we've seen through supports from the provincial government, a remarkable sense of self-worth, dignity, and purpose.
Thank you very much, David. Maxwell, ODSP.
That's not nearly enough. Our party wants to double the amount people in ODSP and OW get. This conversation reminds me of an activist that I met working in HIV named Isabel Gemick. May have that incorrectly. She was someone who lived with chronic pain, was unable to work, and was terrified of the future because she could barely keep up with what was coming next. ODSP was not enough for her to live off of, so she unfortunately chose to take advantage of MAID earlier in late last year. And if that isn't enough evidence, I don't know what is.
Thank you very much, Maxwell. And Bruce.
Thank you. The current rates of ODSP is legislated poverty. We need to immediately double that. We need to increase the shelter cost share of that. We need to keep indexing it as inflation goes. And we need to not claw back when people are able to work. Many people on ODSP can do something and they want to do something, but they can't do it regularly perhaps. They can't do it every day. And it's not going to pay the bills. So we need to be that stopgap that they can keep their apartment or in their home. They can afford food. They can afford to take the bus to work when they can do it. They also need to have the dignity of I'm not having a good day. I don't have to worry about not eating today. So we need to increase this immensely. It is not a handout, it is humans taking care of humans. And the sole purpose of government is to make life better for the citizens that they serve. It is not to enrich businesses. It's not to make the rich even richer. It's not to hand out more silver spoons. It's to make sure people all have a chance at a good life. So we need to make sure our most vulnerable are our most important people to take care of.
Thank you very much, Bruce. And finally, Dorothy.
Yeah, this is why our debates were pretty boring. Doubling, yeah, absolutely. And as a business person, it's amazing when people have dignity and they don't have to worry. All of the other costs that we see, whether, like everything is related. When you look at stress, when you look at mental health, when a person has dignity, they feel better, and so do we. I mean, it's an investment, really, an investment in humanity.
Thank you very much. Well, it's hard to believe how fast time goes by, but that, believe it or not, does wrap up the question and answer period of this debate. We will now hear the closing statements from our candidates. I want to remind all four candidates that you have up to 2 minutes for your final statements. Please pardon the light going off and on. We're all dealing with that. We're going to start off with our final statements in reverse order of how we opened, so David Piccini is first.
Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone for taking some time to watch today's debate. As we face the existential threats of tariffs south of the border, of a president musing about making us a 51st state, we have to protect this province. We have to protect our pocketbooks. A lot of what we discussed tonight requires the ability to have a strong economy, requires the ability to generate revenue, to be able to support the important social service delivery that we depend on in this great province of Ontario. I'm excited about our future. I'm excited about unlocking the critical minerals of the north that can ensure economic success in the south. I'm excited about manufacturing, growth in manufacturing in Ontario, being a province that builds things. I think back to the pandemic when we inherited a PPE supply that had expired and been entirely made in China. Today, over 90% of our personal protective equipment in Ontario's stockpile is made here in Ontario. We're a province making things again. We can be self-sufficient. We didn't talk tonight about energy, but we can produce that energy, clean energy, right here in our community, and it's only Premier Ford and this government that's talked about that with Wesleyville. We're going to keep unlocking the potential of things that are made in this province, ensuring that we stand up and protect this province. Workers in Ontario know that when it comes to their jobs and it comes to important training to land a better job with a bigger paycheck, there's only one leader campaigning here that they can trust. That's Premier Doug Ford. We're never going to be the 51st state. We never want to be, because Canada's not for sale. We're a great province, the engine of the Ontario economy, and with 4 more years, I look forward to working with all of you watching to ensure that our best days are yet to come. Thank you, and on February 27th, please vote David Piccini.
Thank you very much, David. Dorothy, your closing statement.
Thanks. I really didn't picture myself sitting here so very, very soon. It should have been, I keep saying, spring of 2026. It was sprung on us quickly for a mandate that was not required. I remember a PC party that used to be builders. They built Ontario Place, they built the Science Centre, they built TV Ontario. I tell my students that, and they're like, really? I thought they just tore things down. Yeah, they clear-cut Ontario Place in the dark of night. They shut down the Science Centre a day before students are ready to go there for their last week before going on summer holidays. Who does that? It's definitely not the PCs of my youth. And because of that, I'm glad the election is now. I'm glad we have the opportunity to stop the erosion of our public institutions and bring public service back instead of personal gain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. Bruce, your final statement.
Thank you, York. In tough times, who can you trust? After 7 long years with Doug Ford, life is harder for everyone except the rich and well-connected. But it doesn't need to be. We can build homes that everyone can afford. We can fix our schools. We can hire doctors and nurses. We can fix transit. We can do all this working towards a greener economy and working to save our climate. Doug Ford, he spends on wacky schemes. distractions. He said Canada's not for sale, but Ontario certainly has been for sale under Doug Ford to the highest bidder. Then, Doug Ford's hero, Mr. Trump, wins the election south of our border, and all hell breaks loose. So what does Doug Ford do immediately? He quits his job. The man who said he's out to protect Ontario quits on the first day of the fight. And then he has the audacity to ask for his job back again. Well, just remember that Doug Ford will give you more of the same. He will continue to support and enrich his insider friends. Mart Stiles and the NDP will work for everyone. We are not for the rich and powerful. We are for working families. We are for students. We are for young people starting out. We are for our seniors. We are for the most vulnerable people in our community. Those are the people we are here to fight for. And we will fight every day. We will show up every day. And we'll always be there for you. You can trust us on that.
Thank you very much, Bruce. And your closing statement, Maxwell.
Thanks, York. Not to steal Dorothy's thunder, but I've been a politician for all of 3 weeks now. I had no time to prepare. This election completely took us off guard. But here we are, and here I am. And why am I here? Because I love Northumberland. Northumberland is home. It's my favorite place in the entire world. So when you vote Green, keep in mind that green means strong green investments in a sustainable economy. It means more homes for people like me so we can start families. It means funding healthcare. Unfortunately, COVID was a battleground for healthcare workers and our wages were unjustifiably cut. We need to do right by doctors. We need to do right by nurses. As I said before, over 60% of our riding didn't vote in the last election. Let me be your voice. If you really want to show Doug Ford that you're angry, send me to Queen's Park.
Thank you very much, Maxwell. I want to thank the candidates who participated in this Your TV debate. Running for the Progressive Conservatives, David Piccini; for the Liberals, Dorothy Noronha; for the NDP, Bruce LePage; and for the Green Party, Maxwell Groves. Thank you all very much. I also want to remind all of our viewers to make sure you vote on or before February 27th. You've been watching Your Vote, Your TV's extensive coverage of the 2025 provincial election. Thank you very much for watching.